I do my videos. I try to do at least one video a week, and coming up with new topics is always kind of interesting. I go to work every day, or I've got a job clear up at the top of a low-lying mountain area. I'm going to be working at about 1,000-foot elevation, and I thought, okay, what topic should I be talking about today? And it just sort of revealed itself. All the trees at the top of this ridge were wind blown. So all the trees, these are all coast live oak trees, they were all broken up and cracked. And when I first got there, I thought the trees had been topped in the past, but when I got up there, I'm up in the bucket truck right now, I came to the realization that everything was just beat up. So I talked with the homeowner there, and he says, yeah, they get some pretty horrific winds come whipping through there. So I'm looking at all these areas of broken branches and seeing the long-term decay, and he doesn't want to get rid of these trees, but boy, they are in bad shape. They are really, really in rough shape. So here's the work that I was doing. He was trying to lighten up things over his house as well as over his power lines there. They did have one big failure. The big piece of wood broke off. Here, this is really interesting. There were two branches that were rubbing on each other so severely that they'd almost grafted together, but they were separate. And I'm sure that the wind blows, it whips them around really, really significantly. So I had to get in there and look at it a little bit closer to see the extent of the damage. Look at that, it's polished on both sides all the way through. So my question to myself here was, okay, we know these branches are weak. If I take them both off, it's going to leave a huge hole in this tree. Should I do that? Should I take it off anyway because they're potentially unsafe? Well, they're not potentially, they are unsafe. So I kind of weighed everything into this decision making here, and I thought, okay, well, it's not over the house. It's in kind of an area where if they do break, I think I'm going to tell the client what's going on and let him kind of make the final decision on this one. I know both of them need some end weight off of it so I can reduce the leverage, but this is a situation that I can't fix. But it's been like this for decades. These branches have been growing for a long time, rubbing on each other. Then I got looking closer and I could see that there was more than just the damage from the rubbing. This is another area, this further up on the same branch where they used to rub, but they don't rub there anymore. So I'm thinking, okay, what happened? Why is this different? Why is this separated? I couldn't figure that one out. Then I started looking at all the necrotic tissue below it. There's lots of areas of dieback. I'll be honest with you, there's so much wrong with this tree, actually a lot of these trees, that in reality they probably should go. He doesn't want them to go. So I'm going to do the best job that I can with the situation that I've got, being very clear that I'm going to let him know about the hazards. There's that wire he wants to protect. And you got to remember that this is a significant fire area as well. So this is actually a friend of mine. His name is Patrick, and he asked me to come up here. And you can see he's done a really good job clearing for fire all the way around the property. But if something comes down and takes out a wire, that could potentially be a problem. There's some pictures that he took. I was kind of surprised he sent these to me. He took this one from the upper story on the house. There's a picture of me through the screen on the window. I think he was interested. He's got kids, and there was a failure. The failure here is probably what pushed the call out. Said, he came out and said, you've got to help me. We need to do something quickly. And this whole section of the tree just ripped off. And it doesn't take an arborist to recognize that there's a lot of decay. But in my experiences, I find that a lot of people don't realize just how weak decay can often be. And trying to figure out the weaknesses, that's tough. That's tough because until the tree falls down and you can dissect it, all you're really doing is making an educated guess. You can get in there with some tools. You can use a resistograph or a tomograph or a drill, or there's a lot of things you could do to help out, but the homeowners don't do that. So they call us in as professionals. We've got to give them the best advice that we possibly can. So I'm going to just carry on here, and I did dissect this, but I've got an interesting little story that I want you to listen to now about my chainsaw.
I was cutting up this log that fell, a piece of wood fell down. I was looking at the decay in there, and I brought out my old 056. I showed it a little bit earlier, and something happened to me that I wanted to share. You see this little stop switch right here? It's metal. And when I went and turned this off, I got the shock of a lifetime through my thumb when I did that. So something is shorting out. Probably spark plug or wire near the magneto or something. But what that reminded me of was a story that happened to me. It happened to one of the guys that used to work for me. He showed up for work and he had this old saw. It was kind of like this, an old metal saw. It was called a Pioneer. It was back in the 70s. And he was using it as a climbing saw, and he had a lanyard on it, so he was climbing. He got down on the ground, he was cutting up some firewood, and he went to turn it off, and it also had a metal switch like this. And when he turned it off, it shocked him so bad that it caused his hand to grip, and he could not stop. He was getting electrocuted. And I was standing right next to him when this happened, and all I could think of was to do a kick, a real quick kick. And when he did it, he pulled the throttle, and it was just screaming. It didn't turn the saw off. It was just screaming. And I panicked, and I kicked the saw out of his hand. I kicked his hand really hard, and it went out to the end of the lanyard and came back, hit him in the knee, cut him all the way across. So I had to take him to the hospital. That's one of the worst potential injuries. He was okay, a few stitches, but I took him to the hospital, and interestingly, they weren't as concerned about the cut on his knee as they were for his possibility of the damage from the electrocution. But if you have an old saw and it's got some metal parts in there, I used it today, and before I use it again, I'm going to go in there and see if there's some wires that are touching the frame, or maybe the spark plug wire is worn out a little bit. Something's happening. But that was a wake-up call for me today. I was looking at all the decay in here, and that's an interesting shot right there. This is how much living tissue there is, and this is dead, rotting tissue. And as you go further down the piece, it was quite decayed all the way down. And at some point, the decay got less and less and less. Let's roll some of these out of the way and see what it looks like. You can see the edge there. It's still decayed quite a bit. There's a small tube of decay there. And there it's just in the center, and it goes all the way around. There's life all the way around. And at this part of the tree, there's a little discoloration, but the area of decay was isolated to about a 10-foot stretch. And the rest of the upper canopy was full and green and heavy. So that's what brought this one down.